Welcome to our hot take about how human in the loop is failing in two opposite directions simultaneously. And we've designed a governance system that gives us neither safety nor speed. So, Meg, we've spent the last 2 years being told the answer to AI risk is the human in the loop, right? Everybody mentions this. And I want to push on that today because we're seeing a lot of examples, a lot of signals where the human in the loop is failing in real time. We are pulling on a couple signals here. Steve Smith pointed us to Stacia Gar's post about Darwinbox, who's come out with a new AI-based HCM solution, and Stacia's concerns that hit on this concept of a crumple zone. And she referenced Madeline Claire Elish. Do you want to share a little bit about what this crumple zone concept is?
Yes, the description was a moral crumple zone. So the idea that we are creating challenges that are putting strain on helping people make the right decisions. And we're doing this in a way that is yielding responsibility at every level. And so the way I think about this is the way we all just accept the terms and conditions when we download a new app, right? We all know, we were all raised, I hope we were all raised, that you shouldn't sign your name to anything that you haven't read. And yet we're downloading an app, we're trying to do something, we may or may not even scroll, we just hit the accept and move on. There's all kinds of data to suggest we all do that, so it's not unique to me. And we do that because it's just come into our way of being, that the friction of reading it versus like, okay, but I'm getting it for mostly free. And so it's fine. I have no rights here anyway. If I want to use this thing, I'm going to say accept. I think that this whole concept of human in the loop is moving towards that, the removal of the understanding of what you're actually being held responsible for. And by doing that and pretending that it's not happening, we're creating a construct that individuals are just being put at significant risk without the infrastructure to support them. And they're carrying that risk for their companies, for their jobs, for their teams, et cetera, because this whole superset of, there's a human in the loop assumes that human has any idea what is being done in their name and how that will affect all the things downstream. So just the same way that I accept terms and conditions without thinking, and that Claude Code has taught me, unfortunately, to YOLO all the things I might have questioned because I'm building a thing. And so maybe I would have thought about it, but no, I'm just like, sure, yes, accept. The entire sort of approach to AI is everything is left in service of doing things efficiently. And all the accountability of that, we're putting under this umbrella feel-good term, human in the loop, without any infrastructure to make that make sense.
And so the particular example that Stacia brought up that Darwinbox had demoed to her was the case of M&A, not Meg and Amy, but mergers and acquisitions, just, to be really clear. And it's really like just this fantastic ability that we have with LLMs to be able to take all of the data of an acquired company and to compare it to your own company and understand the job structures and the hierarchies and the comp and everything, and to be able to identify where there's differences and, brilliant use case, way better than flight risk, by the way.
Yes.
And so on the surface, wow, what a great use case for AI and for a new kind of HCM. And Stacia's concern was, well, who's going to stand behind this? Who's going to accept responsibility for the data? And, that rings really true because I'm talking to leaders all the time that are going through job architecture realignment, going through work redesign, going through all that. And, they have the same issue, right? There's so much data. There's so much to review. Even if you are only having to do 20%, if that 20% is coming at the speed of AI, then suddenly your work has exploded. And so you have one of two choices. You just kind of assume the terms and conditions are correct and you sign, or you painstakingly go through each one by one. And then what has the AI actually done for you? It has created this theater of there being something great and a whole bunch of expectations thrust upon you that you can't possibly deliver on. And so Stacya's additional thing was, okay, so when somebody asks you, well, why, what, how, and you are put on the spot, what do you do? So what I thought, Meg, was really interesting was Kieran had a piece as well, Kieran Snyder, a former guest, where she talked about the expertise paradox. And through some of her data research, looking at how people with expertise in something are likely to be skeptical of the AI and maybe not even use it. But if they're novices in something, some other part, then they're fine with just letting AI figure it out. And so I know personally that makes a lot of sense, because I was thinking about this in the context of the convergence of engineering, product, and design. And I'm not a coder, so I'm like, yes, Claude, you code away. I will trust you until it breaks. And then I'm like, ah, fuck. But I would never be like, oh, can you come up with a product spec for me? And so I've also been talking to people in these various functions, and you hear engineers starting to just have Claude write a PRD for them, or maybe just come up with a design, and they're like, oh, that's great. And then meanwhile, the product person and the designer are like, that's shit, right? And then the product person does a bunch of vibe coding and the engineer's like, that's shit.
Right. There's a couple heuristics here that are also interesting to overlay on all of this. So first off, you really do need to read Kieran's piece because it's so great. I think there's a subplot in here about how we all perceive that our lives are harder and that we all perceive that our expertise is more compelling and other people's expertise is easy in some way, right? The work other people do is easy. The work I do is hard. And this isn't, again, out of malice. It's just one of those sort of weird quirks we have as humans. And so I think we take that same bias into our relationship with AI. And so we investigate AI's work with a higher bar for things we know how to do than we would investigate it with things we don't understand. And AI is really good at being the best of mediocre, right? And so if it's good mediocre and I don't know the difference between mediocre and great, right, then it looks great to me. And so this is a little bit of a Dunning-Kruger compounding situation. The thing that I think is most interesting is from the beginning, the way I understood the challenges and the opportunities with AI, really, I think we're finally having the right conversations about it. So I love the fact we're having these conversations against a use case I hadn't considered, but against a thesis that I had considered. And that is, AI is just really good at doing things quickly. And if you've ever programmed and had something run away from you, you have lived the experience of, oh, that's not what I meant. And oh crap, it did something quite large on my instructions because I didn't fully understand the lack of friction that comes when you can do something in an automated fashion. And so back to the M&A merging all the people, I've lived that. I've lived that on both sides. I've been the receiver of an acquisition and mapped people. I have seen what happens when it goes wrong. I've seen that is both emotional and pretty traumatic for everybody involved. And I understand that is not a new condition of people coming in from one taxonomy to another and being mismapped. I also understand that the arduous friction, is part of the process of understanding what is coming in. And so when HR would sit down and try to do those mappings by hand, they would invest in understanding the incoming business so that they could make that transformation. And AI is doing what it does, is it, going very quickly and finding commonalities and doing a pretty decent job, but maybe not a perfect job. And so I think just like we worry about all of the parts of cognitive offloading of, whose work is it if you had AI write something for you and you don't really know what it says and you can't really defend it and you don't really understand it. And I think these questions are much bigger, and this is why I like the conversation about a moral crumple zone and bringing it back to what is the systems problem here and what is the role of the organization. And I think in this fragile in-between state, when we talk about this human in the loop, I think it's incumbent on us to double click on what is the responsibility of that job, what is the doability of that job, and what do we do when it goes wrong? Because I think that have not invested enough in thinking about that. And I think the model we need to use is the one that we're seeing come through as people are doing more coding with AI. And that is, you need to spend as much time on the evals or the quality assurance as you do on the design of the thing itself.
So yeah, I had another thought too. So, and this was in Stacya's piece where she talked about how Darwin Box was, capturing through the context graph, capturing all of the decisions of what they were doing. So that got me thinking back to a previous conversation we had, Meg, where we were talking about like being able to share what we could see, but others couldn't see, and how it's often really hard to necessarily remember or articulate all of the signals that cause us to create the judgment that we have in the first place. And so then that got me thinking, well, is there actually a use for AI that could be better in this case, because it is actually able to capture the signals and all of the data points and be able to provide the why in a way that a human actually can't. But the problem is that you still need to have a human own that why and embody that why. And that is a huge gap. Then the other thing that I was thinking, if you think about this M&A example or work redesign, and you apply this this expertise paradox, you've got one camp, which are the work/M&A experts, and they're crying foul. They're saying no, we can't use AI for this. This is a 2-month project because we have to do all these things. And then you have the other camp, which are not the experts, and maybe they're the leaders of the business who have no expertise in it and just see something fast and are like, this is great. This is amazing. Just use that. And then we're done. But the catch is that then those leaders will blame the experts, right? This is real shit.
That's the moral in front of the crumple zone,
right? This is the moral crumple.
Yeah.
I know. It takes me a little longer to get to things.
So again, I don't think we solve it. I really think this is the journey we're on. And to be fair, again, just going back to that M&A example, that business leader is saying, I need this mapping done by tomorrow because we're going to sign the deal, and we need to know the budget, and we need to know how everybody's lining up, and we need to know if there's salary adjustments and what that's going to mean to our bottom line. And so that pressure has always existed, which is why it really was a beautiful use case. Because even that person who wants to take more time is now getting pressure that they can't. And this is a way they can get to that solution, maybe feeling a little better about it versus staying up for 2 days trying to do it over their weekend or whatever. So I don't think there's a path that doesn't force these issues. I think our time is better spent in creating the feedback loops and the catch routines for the things that we get wrong. And in order to do that, we need to quit saying human in the loop is a one step and then everything is happy. That is our mental model today, that we're going to have AI, but humans in the loop. So don't worry, it's all good. Our mental model needs to shift to say, yes, we have AI. Yes, we have human in the loop. And we have feedback loops for what didn't go well. And we need those feedback loops to be thinking about what are the new problems that are going to happen from AI that didn't happen in the past in a way that we would see them or at the scale that we had to create conditions for that
But
AI
can
is
we
going to
do
do
that
that.
like before they happen rather than after it?
Yes, for sure. The evals should be before they happen so that you can try to predict, but you're going to not be smart enough to figure out all the evals you need.
Yeah.
And so this is why you need to acknowledge that from the beginning.
And it's really only fair to the people too, right? I mean, there has to be a way to not have people like screaming and, taking career limiting moves to assert these things. Like it has to be a more natural.
That's right.
Occurrence.
Which is why it's a leadership problem first and foremost, because I think just saying we're going to put a human in the loop is an unrealistic expectation of a human. And that's before you get to the volume of all of it. This is just the quality question. Thanks for hot taking with us. Let's invent the future together, everyone. I believe in us.
Let's make every day count.